Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. Last week on the Arc Review, we intervened in a battlefield and defeated a warlord of the sea on the island of Alabasta. And this week we are going to start to set our sights quite high as we visit the island of Jaya. Jaya is the 12th story in the series and consists of 19 manga chapters and 9 anime episodes, so it's significantly shorter than the last couple of previous arcs, mainly because Jaya serves more as a prologue for what is to come after it. But let's begin this review with 2 words: Nico Robin. At the very beginning of this arc, we have the revelation that Nico Robin boarded the Going Merry from Alabasta and pretty much demanded that she join the crew in exchange for Luffy forcibly saving her life. And this here really does complete the bait and switch of Alabasta, where we were led to believe that Vivi would be joining the crew. And even though I already knew that Robin would be part of the crew by the time I'd read this, I was thrilled for her to show up and suddenly become a Straw Hat. Her presence brought a much needed sense of maturity and worldliness to this group of teenage pirates, and held the very exciting promise of learning much more about the greater mysteries of the One Piece world. But let's go ahead and jump into Jaya proper. I have to say that this arc begins with what is probably one of the most intriguing events in One Piece history. Essentially, while the Straw Hats are just sailing along minding their own business, all of a sudden a giant shipwreck falls out of nowhere from the sky. And this was a really nice reminder that we are after all in the Grand Line, where absolutely anything can happen. I think that's a feeling we may have lost after spending so much time on Alabasta, so it was great to reignite it, almost immediately going into this arc. The Straw Hats then go on to discover a map of Skypiea, and now I am officially sold. Regardless of what Skypiea would turn out to be, I love the idea of Sky Islands, and the thought of visiting one at this stage in the series was incredibly exciting. But that's all for the next arc. The island of Jaya itself that we spend time on during this arc is significantly less exciting, but it really is more of just a port to pass through. It has no real visual intrigue of its own, but that's okay, because we more than make up for that by introducing some of the most ominous characters in the entire series. Scattered throughout Jaya are the Blackbeard Pirates, a name that we've heard before during the Drum arc. They're actually the ones that sacked the island and forced Wapol to flee, so they're not to be taken lightly. However, their official introduction into the series is masterfully done, as one by one we encounter these very odd individuals, all of whom have a very sinister feeling about them. Well, except for Blackbeard himself. This man actually turns out to be quite the little plot twist because he's introduced in a very comical manner, almost getting into a fistfight with Luffy about pie preferences. And while it's very clear that he's not just some random townsperson, there's no real indication of just how much of a threat he is, until the name of Blackbeard is officially dropped, which is an incredible oh shit moment, because we realize just how much trouble Luffy could have gotten himself into. But Blackbeard as a character is much more intriguing than your stock standard threatening villain. During this arc, he is actually responsible for one of the most profound speeches in One Piece, about how people's dreams never die. He and Luffy actually identify with each other on what I'm going to describe as a very uncomfortable level. In some twisted way, they see eye to eye, even though their paths are so entirely different. Actually, come to think of it, Blackbeard is the first antagonistic character in the series who doesn't outright laugh at the ambitions of the Straw Hats. In fact, he even encourages them to pursue traveling to the Sky Islands that nobody else seems to believe in. So really, Blackbeard is a taste of what it truly means to be a pirate in this world, and it's such a stark contrast to the other antagonist of Jaya, Bellamy. Now there's a saying that I really enjoy that goes something a bit like, confidence is silent, insecurity is loud. And that is very, very true in Jaya. Bellamy is a loud and excessively violent punk of a pirate, whereas the Straw Hats, and even Blackbeard to an extent, are quiet agents confidently focusing on their own adventure. And this contrast is made clear through one of the most incredibly satisfying moments of the entire series, where Luffy defeats Bellamy in a single punch, silencing the hyena. This is probably the crowning event of Jaya, and Bellamy's character in fact, because let's be clear, during Jaya, Bellamy is a stock standard villain-like dude. He has very little depth and exists purely to be put in his place by Luffy. The real growth and expansion of his character would have to wait until much later in the series. But moving on to an event that took place during Jaya but not on Jaya, the meeting at Marijois. Thinking back on it, this is probably one of my most fond memories of the Jaya arc because it expanded the One Piece world like never before. We were introduced to powerful figures such as Doflamingo and Bartholomew Kuma, both of whom had bounties that dwarfed Sir Crocodile. But also, for the first time, we were introduced to the Fleet Admiral of the Marines, Sengoku. And when Dracula Mihawk just so happened to stroll into the meeting, each of these characters was instantly elevated to a legendary status amongst the One Piece fanbase. It was amazing to see the greater world at work, because our our perspective is limited to Luffy's perspective for the large majority of the series, but this really served to show that the Straw Hat Pirates were but a tiny cog in this massive machine, and despite having beaten a warlord of the sea, they still had an infinite amount more to do and explore before reaching the pinnacle of this world. But back to Jaya, I think it was a very nice artistic decision to have the real meat of the arc play out during the night, and this was particularly effective in the anime. The previous arc, Alabasta, had been the longest in the history of the series, and it was very much an overload of bright daytime colors, with lots of oranges, yellows, and light blues. Jaya managed to very effectively switch up this tone entirely, and really play with lighting in a way that was impossible during the previous arc. I also personally just love important events taking place during the evening, because I believe it adds a lot to the drama. The only time we'd really seen this prior was during Whiskey Peak, and unfortunately we won't be seeing too much of it in the future either. But the portions we do get are fantastic. Jaya also happens to be the home of one of my favorite all-time animals in the series, the almighty South Bird. I just love everything about this bird, especially the fact that he is such a dick to the Straw Hats. And the concept of a bird that has to point its head in a certain direction is pretty cool as well. I'm not gonna lie, I really do wish that the South Bird had permanently joined the crew and just become some sort of navigational tool for Nami. Other than the South Bird, really the only other noteworthy part of Jaya is the Saruyama Alliance. I think these guys are pretty cool, I guess. I mean, I like their unique designs, but they didn't really leave any sort of overall impression on me. In fact, I often forget they exist entirely. Although there is definitely some intrigue to be had with Mont Blanc Cricket, who serves as the introduction to the story of Noland, which will become incredibly relevant during the next arc. But that kind of sums up Jaya. It's a transitional arc that lays the groundwork for a grand adventure coming up. Outside of the moments with Blackbeard and Bellamy, it doesn't have a whole lot to say on its own, and that's fine. Not everything in One Piece has to be some sort of grand statement, especially coming right off the heels of a huge arc. Jaya was a short stop for the audience to recover before embarking on another large-scale event. And it did its job better than any transitionary arc really has the right to, actually. And that pretty much does it for the Jaya arc. Next week, we'll be taking all of this setup and flying high to take on the mammoth arc that is Sky Pier. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to like, favorite, or subscribe, and please do comment with your thoughts on the Jaya arc. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.